Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I have another simple living video for you guys, and that is what I've decided to name my zero waste, low waste video series. I didn't want to name it like zero waste videos just because I want to also include some low waste and some just general tips, and everything under this category might not be 100% zero waste. So for today's video, I am going to be talking about how to prevent food waste. Food waste is probably one of the most common forms of household waste, especially here in the United States. We waste a lot of food. A lot of it can be avoided, some of it not. A minimal amount of food waste is to be expected, especially if you cook often. With these tips, hopefully you can minimize and think a little bit differently about how much food you are actually wasting. So my first tip is to pay attention. Pay attention to what you usually waste, what types of waste you're using. Is it leftovers food? Is it takeout food? Is it something in particular that you end up wasting a lot, like fruit or something that you're not eating quickly enough? I would just kind of take inventory because everyone is going to be a little bit different. It might even be helpful to create a running list of about a month's worth of food waste, so every time you have to throw away food, just write it down so you can look back and see actually how much you're wasting and try and reflect and figure out ways to avoid some of that waste in the future. My second tip is a pretty simple one, but it is to make what you like to eat. I can't tell you how many times I've had these grand ideas of these healthy, super healthy meals that I'm gonna make, and if I make them and I prepare them and they're in the fridge, I will eat them. But the truth is, I really just don't like certain things. Try not to live up to what other people are making. I know on YouTube there's a lot of what I eat in a day, and sometimes you want to eat like a certain person, but try to also keep in mind what you personally like. My next tip is to shop your fridge and pantry first before going out to the food store. A lot of us have tons of food stored in our fridge and our pantry, and yet we still go out to the food store to buy more every single week. So what I like to do is when it's coming up to around the time that I go grocery shopping, I really like to take inventory of my pantry and try and use up as much stuff as I can until I have to go to the grocery store. I kind of try and hold off grocery shopping till as long as possible and just use what I have. It forces me to get creative and try out new recipes and things and just kind of throw things together to use things up. My next tip is to plan your meals ahead of time. By simply putting in some effort to plan a few meals that you're going to make within the weeks, you can really cut down on food waste because you know the food you're buying has a specific purpose and it is going to be used. My next tip is to just buy less. When you go to the grocery store, don't buy as much. When you have a specific plan, you also end up not overbuying. So by not overbuying, you won't waste a lot of the food. I have really cut down the amount of food that I buy when I go grocery shopping, which in turn has cut my grocery bill down and cut the amount of food I waste down. My next tip is to store and prep your food properly. I'm planning a couple of different videos on this specific topic to kind of show you guys how to store things properly to get the longest shelf life out of them. So look out for that video in the future. So an example of this is that I like to cut up and store my celery in water, and by storing it in water in an airtight container, it lasts for much longer. You can also do that same thing with carrots as well, but by prepping and kind of storing your food properly, you are more likely to use it and it will last longer. My next tip is to freeze any excess that you have. You can easily freeze fruit by laying it out on a pan and freezing it, putting it in the freezer, and then once it's all frozen, putting it into a bag and none of the pieces will stick together. You can also freeze excess soups and broth and things like that in glass jars in the freezer. My next tip is to ferment, pickle, and preserve. There are a lot of different neat ways that you can prolong the shelf life of certain foods by fermenting them and pickling them. It's super easy to learn how to do. I make sauerkraut all the time, fermented pickles, fermented jalapenos, all kinds of things, and it really adds to the nutrition of those things as well, and it just prolongs the shelf life of fresh produce, especially now in spring and summer when produce is just abundantly available. My next tip is to store your food in see-through containers. I particularly prefer glass, but you can also use just clear plastic containers if that's all you have. But by storing things in clear containers, you can actually see the food you have, and you don't have these like colored containers where you open it up and it's just like mystery food that went bad. I really think that this tip is super simple but also very helpful, because when you're looking for things in your fridge, if you have a packed fridge, it's much easier to locate the things you're looking for and to just be more aware of what's actually in your refrigerator. My next tip is to save and utilize scraps. But there are tons of recipes you can use scraps for. I have one personally on my channel about how to make vegetable broth out of kitchen scraps, so I will leave that linked in the cards. But there are a ton of different ways to utilize scraps. I will leave a link to a book down below called Cooking with Scraps. I really enjoyed that book, and it gives you tons of ideas on what to do with kitchen scraps, and it's where I get a lot of my ideas from. So I really like that book, and it's pretty quick read and some pretty neat ideas that you wouldn't think of to use certain food scraps. My next tip is to donate before you throw out. So if you have any canned foods, boxed foods, things that are kind of processed foods, or you're just going through your food and you are trying to get rid of some things, see if you can donate some of those food items before throwing them away. Food pantries are always taking food, and it's a great way to kind of give food a repurpose instead of just throwing it out. And my last tip is with the food waste that you do accumulate, because it's impossible not to accumulate any food waste, is to compost it. I have a video all about composting. I will leave it linked in the cards. If you don't already have a compost system, that video shows you exactly how to set one up in your own backyard, and I have been enjoying the benefits of composting now. And I think it's a really incredible process that allows us to really reduce our waste. When you cook a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that, you are going to create waste, and you can't utilize every piece of scraps that you come up with. So composting is a really great way to eliminate that stuff from going to the landfill. And if you go through all of these steps and you utilize this process, you really should be able to cut down on the amount of food waste you're producing. But I think the most important thing you can do is just be aware, be conscious of it, try to make the conscious effort to reduce your waste in whatever way that looks like for you. Just by taking small steps every day to help eliminate waste is going to be helpful. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel out. If you would like to see more simple living, low waste, zero waste videos, I will leave a link to my playlist in the cards. But with that, I will see you guys in my next video.